Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Season 2 of Scrum Call. In this season, we are diving deeper into the real world of Agile through engaging interviews, thought-provoking articles, and insightful discussions. We are bringing you stories from Agile practitioners who have faced challenges, found solutions, and celebrated success. So, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, tune in to learn, grow, and connect with a broader Agile community. You can find Scrum Call on all major podcast platforms and even on YouTube. So with that, let's get started. Hello and welcome, folks, to another episode of Scrum Call. This is Season 2, Episode 2. Now, we are going ahead with this different approach in this podcast where we will be not only releasing audio but also videos to check out on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platforms. So this time we have another special guest. We have Prayag with us. He's an amazing guy who's been in this Agile journey and transformation with many different companies. He's got some really interesting aspects to share from a different side of things where Agile is applied. So it's not the usual software part of it alone, but it goes beyond that. So before I spill the beans too much on that, I'll just hand it over to Prayag to introduce himself, tell us who he is, and well, over to you, Prayag. Go for it.
Thanks, Shishir. Thanks for having me. My name's Prayag Lele. I essentially operate as a consultant for startups. Typically, I operate in quite a few different spaces, but largely it's with early stage startups, looking to scale. Once they've kind of figured out their initial product and what they're trying to do, it's kind of taking that idea and making it into a scalable company. Typically I work with let's say post-angel invested startups, and then kind of up till Series B is typically what we find is the sweet spot. Though we have done a couple of them with later stage startups as well, based on the industry. We've also done this in quite a few different industries. I've done healthcare, I've done robotics, I've done legal, I've done education. So fairly industry agnostic is the way I like to put it. But I do come from a family of tech, so we have a lot of background with the engineering side of things, and in today's day and age with startups, there is a lot of tech background to that as well. So that's a bit about me, and then obviously we'll dive into some of the details with some of these journeys that we've done. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Prayag, for giving a quick intro of your experience and where you come from. Now, based on our discussions earlier, I'm looking forward to pick your brain on a few topics. So let's jump right into it. Okay. Now,
Sounds
when
good.
we talk about Agile transformation, typically it means that the company or the team has been following a legacy process. More often than not, it would be a waterfall, right? So that has its own hiccups, its own teething problems, and more often than not, it starts with the theory. Right, like how we say in Hindi, giving gyan dena, right? So what is the pitfall with this, because I see a lot of theory being spouted, but when it comes to practicalities of it, it's kind of like it seems like a school kind of thing. So what has your experience been with that?
So yeah, I mean, definitely, right? So I think the key way to deal with this is when you come to do Agile, you have to go back to the basics, right? What's the entire purpose of getting into Agile and whatnot, right? It's to make sure that what you're doing is more efficient, that you're getting things done, things aren't forgotten, and that there's ways that you can have, let's say, small measurable increments every single time, right? Quarterly improvements. So that's what you're trying to do, and it's not so much as just following a process, right? A process is just a means to get things done. So at the end of it, after every change that you introduce into an organization, you have to go back and always ensure that are you actually getting the final results that you set out to do with this, right? And if it's just about following a book and whatnot, that's not going to work, right? Because all of these organizations, right, even within the same industry, typically have multitude of different facets into what they're trying to achieve and whatnot. And because of that, it's very hard to create a single rule set which is going to work for everything. And so I work a lot with HR and org structuring and defining processes and roles and whatnot. And even for the same type of organization, it's not the same. So and it's the same concept with when it comes to agile as well, right? You can't just pick up this theory rule set and just keep on constantly applying that. You have to be ready to make tweaks on the go based on what the need kind of is for the company. And sometimes I especially I see this with people coming in from much more stabilized industries and stable companies where they've been there for 10-15 years, and the company itself is fairly old, it's been around for 20-30 years and whatnot, and then they have this mindset and this is the only way, and there is nothing else, there is no innovation that you can do around this, and then that typically ends up slowing things down.
So it's kind of like if it's broken, why fix it?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
But it's also the other way. If it's definitely broken, you do need to fix it.
Right. So I think with time, things that may seem like it's working great, it needs to change. It's not that it is broken, it needs to change. And from what I have observed, more often than not, we would have these agile coaches come in. They'll have a workshop, for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 hours per day kind of a thing, and they just go headlong in depth of all this theoretical part of, okay, these are the principles and these are this thing and that thing, but what does it mean at a practical level? It becomes a bit of a challenge, because everyone is sitting there and feeling like they're back in college, and the moment that feeling sets in, it's out the window.
Recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster, because the moment they step out of that classroom, it's all gone. F5 has been hit on their minds, because their mind is thinking about how do I finish the damn code which I'm writing on. That's what is running, and that's a pitfall I have noticed. So if I were to just elaborate a little more on that, so how have you tried to sort of mitigate this heavy-handedness of theory by bringing in the practical aspect of it? Has that been something that you would try to sort of work through?
Yeah, that's a tough one on how to exactly deal with it again, because again going back to my earlier point, right? It's very hard to create rule sets for all of these things, right? And then you'd kind of fall into that same trap. But there are a variety of different things that you can look at, right? So one, I think common trends which typically tend to be the problem is involvement of the leadership in the entire process. If the leadership isn't in sync with why these structures are kind of happening, well, then that itself is it's kind of undermining to the entire exercise, right? And then it's not going to follow through. Another thing is so managers who are actually going to be executing this, right? Your managers, your product owners, your scrum masters, if they're also not on board with the philosophy behind the underlying philosophy behind going along this, that's going to be another problem as well. And I think another key aspect where you really translate this to, let's say your employees who are actually going to do the execution of the task itself, is you have to kind of bring that in together with your performance cycles. And I think that is where it really kind of comes together, because when you say performance cycles, I'm talking about OKRs and overall goals and targets that you're kind of looking at. So when you say that, you have to really kind of build it down from somewhat like a top-down approach, but then also from a bottom-up approach, and kind of find a way to kind of merge them in the middle, and that's makes kind sense. Of what your structure has to kind of go towards. So you set up org level priorities, then you break those down into smaller tasks. Okay, so this is what you're trying to achieve, right? So if this, what are the set of tasks that need to be done, right? If these are the set of tasks, then who's going to execute them? And then you're defining proper ownerships behind all of those tasks, and who's going to own that, and trying to sort out the chaos is kind of the idea, and then breaking those into small manageable tasks.
I think that's a good point you just said, sorting out the chaos. I think that's what it comes down to, right? Sorting it out and making it relatable. So again, going to your point of how do you get the leadership buy-in, but also how do you get the buy-in from the people who are executing the task. So we put it into their OKR, and now they're more incentivized towards that.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So now, if we talk about transformation in general, right, and with anything new that one is trying to learn, get better at, there's always the aspect of discipline to it, right?
200.
So Yeah. What have you seen in your experience when it comes to these transformations where people are struggling and discipline turns out to be one of the factors which was kind of missing? And how did you go about it?
So this is actually another common trend which you'll see, in these early stage startups, especially because, just to be blunt about it, yeah, I mean, I think definitely a factor for people coming to kind of startups is that they kind of want to break away from the monotony of, let's say well-structured MNC, where they, want those, levels of freedom, especially when it, the last, the 10, 15 years, it's been a trend for startups to be, very flexible, very, oh, acha, you can do this, you can come and go wherever you want.
Very
whatnot.
offbeat.
Yeah, and then when you try to kind of bring those structures through agile methodologies, so you can say tools through Scrum, through Kanban and whatnot, that discipline then kind of is a requirement, but then that structure is something where you start to see some pushback from acha, I don't want to be here for this meeting, am I really needed? And then acha, do I have to come in at this time, can we do this at some other? And then that's kind of where you start having those small let's say flexibilities, and then that kind of takes away from slowly starts chipping away. So
yeah, it snowballs
so I think
into
that's one thing.
It snowballs into these anti-patterns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I've seen, in my experience, one of the I would say the smallest snowball that rolls into a big one. I've seen this in the daily stand-up. I've usually, have had even POs for that matter. I mean, I was shocked. How can a PO think that way? But even POs or sometimes even leadership who think that they need to be part of the stand-up, they're like, hey, can we move it today? Or like, typically it should be at the same time, same place every single day, right? But they'll be like, let's keep moving it. It's fine. It's flexible. It's agile, right? So we have to be agile about it. So that thing then starts snowballing, and then suddenly one or two people start missing, hey, I have this conflict, that conflict, because the meeting is not fixed, so people can't plan, and it just goes into this weird ugly creature where everyone is like, haan, chalta hai, it's
Yeah.
it just goes, it's fine kind of thing. So yeah, that is one big sort of a pitfall when it comes to
I also think the pandemic and the work from home which kind of came after that has also added some fuel to the fire on that as well, kind of changing the dynamic of the entire workplace significantly, right? So I think all of this is a bit of uncharted territory, and we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. But yeah, I think it's always first principles, right? Every time you come up with these activities or problems, it's always going back to the root, and figuring out why are we doing something, and keeping and coming back to those principles and hammering those down, and that's the only real way forward.
True. And I'll just relate a funny incident, and this was probably not part of a conversation, but it just sort of I remembered this. So I remember during the pandemic, and this was like early stages, like everyone's getting comfy with the work from home scenario and all that. So I was in one of these calls, and I'm hearing one particular person, and there's this scraping sound, like grr, grr, grr. I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I, in Teams, it will sort of, start bobbing like that name, right? So I was like, bro, what is that sound? There's some background noise coming at your end. Do you want to just, drop and join back? I thought it's some network thing. He's like, oh, actually, I'm just having my lunch. I'm like, oh, that explains the scraping sound. So anyway, we went with the stand-up and everything. Then I pinged him separately, and I was like, bro, see, I understand it's work from home, but you're still doing official work. Can we have some level of seriousness? I understand that this is probably your lunchtime, but then the meeting time has not changed. That is what it was when we were in office, and you used to be in the same room with me. So what has changed? Like, why has your lunch? I'm not saying don't have lunch or anything. It's fine. But at least be cognizant of the fact that there are many others also in the call. So at least be on mute if you're not talking, right? Or at least when you're talking, maybe just keep the plate aside and just go. It's just how to say, it is discipline, of course, but at the same time, it's also a bit of being conscious of how you are representing yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're at home, but don't show so obviously that you're chilling over there. At least have some level of seriousness. And these are little things, little things that make that overall good snowball, I would say. So yeah, we covered two really important things, right? I mean, there are many more if we were to go down that rabbit hole. But there's one big one that I want to bring up now: leadership. In my experience, many times I've seen the senior leaderships in particular, right? I'm not sure if they are even given some sort of training, or if it is that in depth that is given to the actual workforce. But in some cases, it becomes like a checklist for them. Okay, we are using Jira. Check. We are using Confluence. Check. We are having daily stand-up. We have a Scrum Master. Oh, we are Agile now. We have got Jira. We have got Scrum Master. We have daily stand-up. Yeah, we are Agile. So, and for them again, it becomes like a matter of, what's missing. Why is this cadence not happening? So it's again very prescriptive the way they take it. So keeping that in mind, what is this? How have you sort of tried to mitigate this sort of issue with the leadership? I would say, just curious to hear.
Yeah, it's again a tough problem, and I think typically, especially with the kind of client base that I typically work with, right? These are early stage startups, and typically the people who actually came up with the idea, right? They're not people who have been appointed to kind of run these shows, right? They had an idea, they had a brilliant idea, and they've put together some kind of funding, and they've put together some kind of structure, and I mean, we can dive into the psychology aspect of it a bit later as well, but I mean, so these people are typically creative folk, is the way I like to think about it, right? As the simplest way.
That's true.
And these people like the dynamic, like I mean, they're only able to think when they have that, you have that that you would say cliche or myth kind of that, creative people tend to be very disorganized and chaotic, right? And I think there's some truth to that as well, right? So that, because these people have come up with these disruptive ideas to kind of, enter the marketplace, they don't typically have the most organized way of going about it, right? And when, what people typically don't understand is, scaling up a startup and creating a startup are two different games altogether, right? And when you're scaling up, and that's kind of when this agile bit is kind of kicking in, right? Because this is a methodology, and this is something much more for the organized thinker or the organized approach, right? You want someone who's maybe not the most creative person, but has a certain amount of discipline and a method to come out of the madness, let's say.
A method to the madness, true.
Yeah, and then so these are typically a different set of people. So and if you try to transpose this onto larger stabilized companies, you'll see that most of the people who come in at these senior level manager positions or whatnot are people who are those scalers and organized discipline kind of thing, and that's kind of what they're bringing about, right? To bring that structure in.
Yeah.
And bringing in that structure is it requires a different type of people, but in this situation you kind of have to work with what you have. So
right.
So it's not like you can just hire like 4 new people and just to be this new tier of management. That's not necessarily a feasible solution either. So it's a bit of training, I think, as well. Kind of conversations and kind of really getting them to understand that okay, you may think that this is not important or is insignificant in your time of day, but it has far-reaching implications. Your actions especially do, right? So you can say as much as you want that agile is important, we are doing this and whatnot, but your actions have to say that as well. If you're doing this, skipping meetings, pushing this up, it trickles down and people read into those, even if they don't do it consciously. Subconsciously it does happen. So yeah, I think that's
very true. And what I've also observed as a pitfall that I have seen, if the leadership is more superficial with the whole agile thing, and like you very rightly said, right? People read into it. People observe their leaders, right? Whether they like them or not, they observe their leaders, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are trickling down the bread and butter, right? So they are looking at them. And if they tend to have a very nonchalant sort of an attitude, then the team sort of imbibes that. And that only makes the POs and the Scrum Master, especially the Scrum Master's life, very difficult. because then the attitude is ki boss ko farak nahi padta, why should I care? If the boss doesn't care, why should I care? And that's a very big. And then if you go and start pulling up your Scrum Master saying, hey, you're not doing a good job, I think that's not fair. You need to show that attitude first, only then can the Scrum Master back it up, right? The Scrum Master is a facilitator at best, right? He's not going to pull people's ears and make them do it. It's soft skills at the end of the day, right? So yeah, I think that's one major thing. And yeah, conversations aside with the leadership, focused on like maybe a feedback kind of a thing, and that's again a very, very dicey thing. It's like walking on crushed glass. because you don't know what kind of egos you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but then that has to be done at the end of the day. Maybe it's a slow, longer process, but I think conversation is a cornerstone of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So cool, man. This was some really good points that we discussed. And I think for anyone who's on a new agile journey, or if you have been experienced, I'm sure whatever we have spoken here will have touched your nerves somewhere or the other. So if there are any such things that you might want to deep dive into, or if you want that maybe we can talk about this as well, drop in a note to us. The email is in the show notes. It's there in the outro. You can leave a comment. You can connect with us on our socials. I'll also link Prayag's socials in our show notes, so feel free to reach out to him as well. But with that, I think we have come to a quick end to our episode with very focused discussion. So Prayag, I thank you so much for your time, man. And
Thanks,
I
man.
look forward to discussing again maybe in one of the future episodes.
Likewise.
All right. So with that, folks, I wish you all well, and there are no impediments as of now. Alrighty, guys, that's all we had for today. And I thank you for joining us for yet another episode. We hope you learned something valuable and it ignited your passion for Agile. We truly appreciate your time, and if you enjoyed this episode, please consider the opportunity to join this fledgling community by becoming a subscriber and helping to spread the knowledge by liking and sharing this episode among your circles and even your Agile teams. Finally, to make it worth your time with us, I want you to know that your interaction is what keeps Scrum Call relevant and exciting. Leave us a comment or drop an email at scrumcall.feb17@gmail.com. That is scrumcall.f for father, E for egg, B for baby, and the numbers 17. scrumcall.feb17@gmail.com. Share your thoughts, your suggestions, or simply tell us what is it that you would like us to cover in future episodes. Until next time, remember, Agile is common sense in practice.